Did Igor Shesterkin's price actually increase after the Rangers 4-1 win in Toronto? We break down the netminder's big night. Plus, is Victor Mancini in the lineup for good?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1164 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Rangers come away with an impressive 4-1 win on the road against Toronto, kind of a back and forth game. There were times where the Rangers had the better of play. There were times where Toronto had the better of play, but it was nice to see the Rangers win one of these kinds of games. You know, everybody's, I think, feeling pretty good to start the season here. 4-0-1, 9 points out of a possible 10. But we haven't really seen a game like this where the Rangers, low-scoring game where they had to hang on to a late lead, and they were able to do that thanks in no small part, obviously, to their goalie, Igor Shesterkin, who was absolutely fantastic in this game. Rangers had a couple empty netters at the end to, make the score seem a little bit more lopsided than it was. But either way, really, really nice win for the Rangers on the road against, obviously, a very tough opponent. But we'll get to Igor in a little bit. I wanted to start today's episode by talking about some lineup decisions that the Rangers made both for this game and what they might be thinking in the near future as well. So to begin with, we saw, and we're going to talk about Chad Ruhwedel, him making his season debut here. We'll get to him. We'll actually start with him. We'll get to also Zach Jones coming out of the lineup and why that's kind of interesting, the fact that it was him and not Victor Mancini who subbed out in favor of Chad Ruhwedel. And then also Matt Rempe getting back into the lineup in this game as well. So a lot going on here. And Ryan Lindgren's going to be coming back from injury. We'll get to that as well. But to begin with, Chad Ruhwedel makes his season debut with the New York Rangers after coming over at the trade deadline last season, playing in 5 regular season games with the Blue Shirts, no playoff games. But first of all, as far as like the Rangers going with Chad Ruhwedel for a game, it's fine. I see people, there's always people on social media losing their minds and, oh my God, why are we putting this, 34-year-old into the game over the young kid, Zach Jones? This is ridiculous, and on and on and on. Look, I think long-term, you will see Zach Jones remain ahead of Chad Ruhwedel in the pecking order. But this goes back to something I talked about just an episode or two ago when discussing Ranger lineup plans and what they're going to be doing. I think it's okay for Chad Ruhwedel to get a game every once in a blue moon. I think that'll be all right. He's a steady veteran. He's not going to lose the game for you very often, at least. The Rangers came into this game at 3-0-1, so things are obviously going well. And in the last episode, or it might have been 2 episodes ago, I pitched the idea of Chad Ruhwedel getting a game right around maybe like the 8th game of the season. The Rangers did a little bit quicker than that. They put him in for the 5th game of the season. As far as the reason why, I think it goes back to what we talked about, again, an episode or 2 ago, the very simple fact that you don't want somebody going ice cold in the press box. I think sooner or later, you want to get them out. You want to get them into a game. The Rangers did that with Ruhwedel here, and he did fine. He actually had a pretty solid night for the New York Rangers. They gave him his chance. And I think part of this too is that Ryan Lindgren is going to be back in the not too distant future. So if you don't get Ruhwedel a game here tonight against Toronto or maybe in the next one, then when is it going to happen? Because once Lindgren is back, I think Ruhwedel goes back to being probably 8th in the pecking order as far as Ranger defensemen are concerned. I think certainly Jones is still in front of him and obviously Mancini as well. So I think it made sense. And like I said, he did fine, had 14 minutes and 4 seconds, second least amount of ice time among Ranger forwards. But, ended up with 2 hits and 4 blocked shots, but played a solid night for the New York Rangers. Even had a little bit of a hand in the goal that the Rangers scored when there was a delayed penalty. And Kreider ended up scoring from the doorstep. He had the puck for part of that as well. Didn't get an assist, but he handled the puck during that sequence. And as far as this part to me is even more interesting. So Ruhwedel went into the game. But I think a lot of us, or me at least, I figured once Ruhwedel got a game, it might be Mancini who came out, just for the one game. Rangers did not do that. They ended up going with Zach Jones as the healthy scratch. Victor Mancini stayed in the lineup, and Mancini actually played the left side in this game and didn't miss a beat. We're going to get to Mancini in just a second. But that decision to get Ruhwedel into the lineup, again, that's not that surprising to me. What was a little bit surprising, what made my eyebrows go up a little bit, was it was Jones that was the odd man out rather than Mancini. And I just have to wonder out loud here, is that a sign of things to come? Has Mancini And he was very good in this game. He's been very good all season. But has Mancini impressed the Ranger coaching staff to the point that even when everybody's healthy, even when Ryan Lindgren comes back, that he's going to be the sixth defenseman and Zach Jones is going to be the odd man out? I'm very curious to see what happens. The interesting thing about that is that if you go with Mancini as your sixth defenseman, once Ryan Lindgren returns, then you either have to carry both Ruhwedel and Jones as, the healthy scratches, or you send one of them down to the AHL. But, Ruhwedel is not waiver exempt, and I'm almost positive Zach Jones is not waiver exempt at this point anymore either. So I don't think they would certainly place Zach Jones on waivers. I mean, do they trade him? I feel for Zach Jones because I think overall he's done well this season, but it feels like every time he's about to get a chance with this team, the team either gets healthy or somebody else steps up, in this case Mancini, and kind of jumps him in the pecking order. It is what it is. Mancini, you can't take anything away from him. He's doing everything that he can to stick in the Ranger lineup, and obviously he got the nod over Jones in this game, but I do feel for Jones at least a little bit because it's not like he's playing poorly. It's just a situation where, as has been the case so often for Zach Jones, there's just not going to be a spot for him when everybody's healthy, at least if last night's game was any indication. Because going by this, again, Ruhwedel gets in, somebody has to come out. It was Jones and not Mancini, which would suggest to me that Mancini has kind of topped Zach Jones as far as, who's going to be in the lineup, who's the priority to get into the lineup. But yeah, Mancini was really good, kind of highlighting a couple of plays that he made in this game. He was in a tough spot in the corners in the first period, was able to spin away from Mitch Marner, got the puck out of the zone. It looked like Mancini blocked a shot a little bit later in this shift as well, and then he knocked down Holmberg, who was trying to get to the front of the net. So 3 separate solid plays by Mancini on one shift. He also got his first career assist on the goal by Lafreniere. Mancini took a shot from the blue line. Trocheck deflected it. The save was made. Lafreniere came by, picked it up, shot it into the twine, and made it 1-0 in favor of the Rangers. And then in the second period, this is something that really stood out to me in the second period, and has really stood out to me pretty much the entire season with Mancini, something that he does very well away from the puck, and that is he really takes care of the crease. He clears guys out of there. Now, hockey has changed, and we are at a point now where you're not allowed to just mug your opponents when they're in the crease. You used to be able to get away with just about anything. If there was no blood, there was not going to be any penalty. So you can't really go as extreme as you used to be able to, but you can still knock guys around in there. You can still knock them off balance. You can still clear them out of there. And there were a couple of times where Mancini did exactly that. He was actually engaged with Ryan Reeves, our old friend there. He was in the crease with Ryan Reeves and was able to clear him out of there. And then later in this shift, Igor made one of many outstanding saves that he made on this night. Was kind of down the ice, reached up and made a great glove save. But if Mancini's not able to clear Reeves out of there, maybe it deflects off of one of them and goes into the net. Maybe Reeves is able to find a rebound, whatever it might be. Or maybe Igor just never sees the shot. If those are two big-bodied guys there between Reeves and Mancini. So that shot, if Igor doesn't get a clean look at it, maybe that ends up in the net. So Mancini just a great job there, does a great job clearing guys out of the crease. And that's something that occasionally on this podcast, I've gotten on the Ranger defenseman about a little bit. There's times where I feel like there's just not enough resistance. Opposing players will basically set up shop in the crease, and they just don't. There's not enough of a resistance from the Ranger defenseman to get them out of there. But Victor Mancini does a really nice job with that, and I think that's one of a lot of reasons why he's won Ranger fans over as quickly as he has, and has established himself as somebody that has not come out of the lineup thus far in the season. Somebody that was basically a preseason afterthought is closing in on being a permanent member of this Ranger lineup in a night in and night out basis, which is obviously very impressive. And plays like this don't hurt either. There was a 3-on-1 that Toronto had in the second period, and their name players, I think it was some of the real big name players in Toronto going in on the rush. 3-on-1, couple of nice passes, and then Mancini is able to block a pass and kind of got the Rangers going on a rush in the opposite direction. And speaking of the rush, wasn't long after that, Mancini actually jumped into a rush. He went right up the center of the ice toward the net, passed to his left to Trocheck. Trocheck went to his right to Panarin. Panarin to his right to Lafreniere. The shot was stopped. But man, Mancini's doing it all. And something that was especially impressive for Mancini in this game is that he was doing it against a lot of the Toronto Stars, a lot of the big name players over there, because it's an away game for the Rangers. So obviously that means that Toronto gets last change. And I think that, they were kind of doing their best to put some of their star players out there against this young rookie defenseman. And obviously he held up great. Now, again, Igor Shesterkin was phenomenal in this game. He was the number one reason why the Rangers didn't give up more than one goal. But nevertheless, I think Mancini certainly held his own against a very high-powered attack. And it's looking more and more like he's going to be staying in the lineup going forward. Speaking of somebody that's kind of been like in and out of the lineup a little bit, let's talk a little bit about Matt Rempe. He was back into this game. He subbed in for Jonny Brodzinski. And, overall, Rempe I thought was solid. I mean, he only got 7 minutes and 37 seconds, but that was a step up from the last game that he played where he only got 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I should have been paying closer attention to this, but I don't think that Matt Rempe got a shift in the third period. If he did it had to have been early in the third. He certainly wasn't out there when the Rangers were up by 1 goal late and obviously trying to hang on to the lead. I wish he would get a little bit more rope, but it also kind of brings me back to something that Peter Laviolette talked about, in the preseason, going into the season. There's basically right now, with VZ out of the lineup, there's 4 forwards for 3 spots on the Ranger fourth line. It's Carrick, it's Edstrom, it's Rempe, and it's Brodzinski. Those are the 4 that are available and healthy right now. And Laviolette mentioned that there could be a little bit of a rotation there, guys kind of going in and out of the lineup. But to date, we've only seen basically a 2-man rotation because Edstrom and Carrick have both played all 5 games. Rempe has played 2, and Brodzinski has played 3. I'm just curious to see if either of the other 2, Edstrom or Carrick, might have a seat at one time or another. Right now, I would not do that because I think Adam Edstrom has played very well, and Sam Carrick in this game I thought was really good. He almost got a tip-in goal off of a feed from Matt Rempe. It was, I want to say, the first period. He had Rempe going over the blue line, off the left side, and made a nice move, actually, and then sent a backhand pass through the crease. Carrick got his stick on it, but just not enough to redirect it toward the net. So they came pretty close there, and Carrick in general just played his brand of, hard-nosed, solid defensive hockey. So haven't talked a whole lot about Carrick. Obviously, technically the Rangers' biggest free agent pickup this offseason, because if you remember, Reilly Smith was obviously acquired via a trade. But I think Carrick's played pretty well, and I'm just curious to see how this fourth line is going to go. Right now, it feels like it is just kind of a 2-man rotation. And what happens when Jimmy Vesey gets back? At that point, does Matt Rempe head to the minors? I think that's at least somewhat possible. I know there's going to be some people that are unhappy about that, but I'd rather that than him playing 40% of the games, and even when he does, being out there for like 4 minutes, 5 minutes at the most. Better to let Matt Rempe develop his game, and then you call him back up when you need him a little bit later in the season. That's my vote anyway. Other people might feel a different way, but if this is how it's going to be with Rempe, with him playing extremely sparingly, even being in the lineup extremely sparingly, then I think that's probably the best course of action for basically everybody involved. But we'll see how the Rangers look to play it when Jimmy Vesey gets back. But it's good to have these problems. They're not even really problems. There's a lot of guys who are very deserving of being in the lineup, guys that are deserving of more ice time, and there's only so much of all those things to go around. And nobody's playing poorly. I mean, that's the thing. You got a 4-0-1 team here. That would suggest that obviously the Rangers have hit the ground running, and a lot of guys are playing very, very well. It's hard to pick out a weak link and look at that guy and say, man, he had a bad game, get him out of the lineup in the next one. No, everybody's playing well. And like I said, a good problem to have, if you can even call it a problem. So going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to shift our attention to Igor Shesterkin, who was absolutely fantastic in this game. Has he increased his asking price? Has his price just gone up? We'll talk about that in just a minute. All right, we just want to take a quick minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Hims. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there is no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable, compounded products, which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers as always. In our next episode, very much looking forward to that. We're going to share your stories that you shared with me about where you were, what you were doing, and how you experienced the Rangers' last run through the Stanley Cup playoffs, specifically focusing on the 4 overtime wins that they got. But for right now, let's keep the focus on this game. and more specifically on Igor Shesterkin and the question of whether he just got even more expensive with that performance last night. He was absolutely fantastic. He stopped 34 or 35 shots. What's difficult about Igor Shesterkin right now, if you're a Ranger fan, first of all, you might have some mixed feelings based on the fact that the Rangers offered to make him the highest paid goalie in NHL history, and he declined. Some of you might still be mad at Chris Drury for even going that high for a goalie in the first place. And when you look at the contracts that some of Igor's peers have, some other really good goalies from around the league, you might have a little bit of a point there because all the rest of them are in that $8.25, $8.5 million range. And Igor obviously won significantly more than that. So it's tough because you want to see him go out there. You want to see him excel. You want to see him be one of the biggest reasons why the Rangers win. But by that same token, every time he does this, he potentially gets more and more expensive. So it is kind of like it's a little bit of a catch-22, I suppose. But what really stood out for me about Igor in this game, apart from just all the nasty saves that he was making, a couple of things. First of all, he did a phenomenal job against the Toronto star players. You look at kind of the big four there. Matthews had 9 shots on goal. Nylander had 8. The other two didn't really have that many. Tavares had 2. Marner had 1. But that's a combined total of 20 shots on goal by the 4 big-name players on Toronto, the 4, feared scorers. And Igor stopped 19 of them. He was only beaten on the one by Austin Matthews on a wraparound. You know what? He's not perfect. He's got to let in a few goals every once in a while. We'll give him a pass for that. But yeah, I mean, again, Igor, the other thing I want to mention here as far as like why you have to love this performance is he was at his best in crunch time. And that has been a theme for Igor Shesterkin really ever since he's come into the NHL. We've talked about how he always steps up his game in the playoffs. It feels like down the stretch in games, if the Rangers have a 1-goal lead and you really, really need your goaltender to bail you out, he's there to do it. And he did it multiple times in this game. As good as he was in the first 2 periods, the first period in particular, when Toronto got a little bit of a jump on the Rangers, from the opening faceoff, I thought they had the better of play for the first 10 minutes, which has been kind of a theme for the Rangers. As good as they've been, their starts could probably be a little bit better. But as good as Igor was in that first period, he was even better in the third period. You had a situation where Nylander was trying to get by K'Andre Miller. Miller, was trying to prevent him from getting to the net, and he somewhat did that, but Nylander was able to get to the front of the net. Igor made a really nice save there, stuck at his right pad. The shift right after this, that's the one where Matthews scored. But then not too long after the Matthews goal, Matthews had another chance on the doorstep. He was by himself in the crease, basically. And so Igor had to kind of wait him out. Matthews stick-handled for just a second. And then Igor was able to make a save. And then Matthews' rebound attempt went a little bit wide of the net. There were a couple of windmill saves that Igor Shesterkin made in this game where I think there was one in the second period, one in the third period. I mean, just cat-like reflexes with that glove there, keeping the puck out of the net. And, we're talking about Igor here, but I do have to give a quick shout-out to the Ranger third line. They had what I would say was maybe the most important shift of this game for the Rangers, because this is when all this chaos is happening in the third period here. And Igor's standing on his head, making all these fantastic saves, denying all of Toronto's big-time stars. In the third period, again, sustained pressure after the Matthews goal had cut the Ranger lead to 2-1. And then we had the Ranger third line. It was kind of a hybrid of the third line because you had Edstrom, Hedel, and Kakko, but they were all out there together, and they had a very, very long kind of grinded out shift in the offensive zone. They maintained possession for a really long time here. Kind of just took the air out of the building a little bit, maybe took the wind out of the sails of the Toronto players in addition to that, because Toronto was absolutely buzzing once they cut it down to 2-1. And Igor was making all those great saves. But the Rangers really needed a shift like this. They needed a shift where, a couple of good scoring chances, that was nice. But more importantly, they just spent a ton of time on Toronto's side of the ice. And I don't know that the Leafs ever really got back to that level that they were at. They had a couple more chances after this shift by this hybrid third line here, but they didn't really, they weren't buzzing in the same way that they were before the shift happened. So I got to give props to Hedel, Kakko, Edstrom. Again, just a grinded out shift in the offensive zone, taking the air out of the game a little bit, taking the wind out of the Toronto Maple Leafs players' sails, and obviously helping the Rangers close in on this win. Nylander did get another chance in deep for the Leafs with 3:30 to go, and that's when you got your second of 2 Igor Shesterkin windmill saves on this night. And just a fantastic save there. Wasn't able to catch this one, but he did fight it off with his glove, or it might have even caught his pad a little bit. One way or another, Igor just kind of improvised there, kept the puck out of the net, and preserved the Rangers' lead for 2-1. Then, of course, Leafs have to pull their goalie. The Rangers add 2 empty netters and drive home safe. Everybody goes home happy if you're a Ranger fan. But, yeah, man, Igor Shesterkin, again, that's a theme of his. comes up big when the Rangers need him the most. You look at the third period of this game, he ended up facing 18 shots, stopped all but one of them, and there were some true highlight reel saves. When I say highlight reel, I'm not just talking about this game. I'm talking about like plays of the night kind of thing. I want to say there were 13 games played on Saturday night. This should be the number one, play of the night. The first of the 2 windmill saves that he was able to make. But again, we've been kind of talking about this on and off, but the question that all of this begs is Igor's price now increasing? And again, this is kind of an uncertain situation for Ranger fans. I mean, I want Igor Shesterkin to stay. I do. I'm a fan of his. He's our guy. He's homegrown. He's been at times, obviously the best player on the ice. You look at the Ranger playoff runs the last couple of years, the 2 years that they went to the conference final, he had as much to do with that as anybody else. Certainly last year against the Panthers, keeping the Rangers in that series. So there's some uncertainty. We don't know if he's going to be here beyond this year. But I got to say, it is going to be kind of funny to watch this season unfold, especially early, because every good game that he has, the narrative is going to be, oh my God, his price just went up even higher. Maybe Igor was smart to bet on himself. Maybe the Rangers are going to end up spending $13 million a season on Igor Shesterkin. But then every time he has a bad game, or like a subpar game at least, like he did against Utah, it's going to be like, oh man, he should have taken the money. That wasn't good enough. His price is going to be dropping by the day. It's just going to be fun and interesting to see everything unfold this season and watch his price basically fluctuate by game, which is sort of what's going to happen. You never know what can occur, because obviously, the Rangers and Igor, I've mentioned this in the past. I'm going to say this in one of these episodes, and it's actually going to be true. Maybe they're sitting down and hammering out an extension as we speak right now. But until that happens, if it does happen, that's going to be the narrative. Every good game, his price goes up. Every bad game, his price goes down a little bit. So going to be very, very interesting to watch that play out for as long as it continues, as long as the storyline continues. And it will continue until Igor Shesterkin signs an extension with the Rangers or ends up with a different team next season. One or the other. There's got to be some finality at some point. But until that happens, we're going to be watching every game that he plays with bated breath and trying to calculate in our heads, like, okay, how much is his salary now? After this good game, after this bad game, after this so-so game, you guys get the idea. Going to be a very interesting storyline to track for sure. So in just a second, going to shift our attention to the Mika Zibanejad line, which I thought had its best line its best game rather on the young season thus far. They were buzzing, and I thought overall had a strong night. We'll talk about all those guys in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. All right, going to go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. I figure we could pretty much close out today's episode by talking a little bit about the Mika Zibanejad line. You guys know how it goes at this point. There's times where Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider specifically, and I'd say more so Mika Zibanejad recently than Kreider, they come under fire. And there's times where it's warranted. I think it's fair game, especially when you consider the fact that they're the 2 longest tenured Rangers. They're obviously both very highly paid, and expectations rightly should be very high of both of those players. But I think for at least one night, this duo plus Smith, if you want to go all the way with it and say the trio, I think they silenced the doubters for at least one night. You end up with 2 assists for Mika Zibanejad, 2 assists for Reilly Smith, 2 goals for Chris Kreider. And yes, I want to get this out of the way right here quickly before a dozen people point this out. Yes, one of each of those things did occur on an empty net goal. Mika and Smith both got an assist on an empty net goal by Chris Kreider. Even with that being the case, this was still very much a step in the right direction. These guys were flying out there. They combined for 8 shots on net. I already mentioned the 6 points, or I guess we can go with 3 points if you don't want to count the empty netter. But just a lot of little things in this game from this line that I really liked quite a bit. The first shift of the game, Mika Zibanejad, he did not get credit for a hit on this play, but he follows John Tavares along the boards and came over and put a hit on him and at least separated him from the puck. It wasn't like this bone-jarring Matt Rempe-esque hit, but that's okay. Mika Zibanejad does enough of other good things that, you don't necessarily need that. Bottom line, it was still an assertive play. It kind of set the tone for this line early in the game. There was also a situation early where Mika Zibanejad gained the blue line with a ton of speed, left it for Jacob Trouba. Trouba put the puck toward the net, passing for Chris Kreider. Kreider looking for the redirection, wasn't able to do it there. But obviously they did end up scoring a little bit later in the game, in the second period to be exact. Just a blue-collar shift by this top line here, the Mika line. You had Reilly Smith drawing a penalty with a strong drive to the net of Toronto, and he was tripped up while doing so. And then he's able to get the puck from behind the net over to Mika Zibanejad in the corner. Mika then passes back to the blue line to Chad Ruhwedel. Ruhwedel, we mentioned earlier, how he had a little bit of a hand in this goal that was scored by the Rangers. And Panarin was on the ice, and obviously that helps because there is a delayed penalty against Toronto. By this point, Igor had gotten to the bench, so Panarin jumps on as the extra skater. But it was funny to see Chad Ruhwedel just kind of give up the puck to Panarin and just kind of stand back. It's kind of like, yeah, you handle this. This is kind of your thing right here. Panarin's got the puck. Great pass across the ice to Mika Zibanejad, and then Mika goes in deep to Kreider. Kreider's there on the doorstep. We've seen him do this a million times. He stuffs it into the net and gives the Rangers a 2-0 lead on the delayed penalty. So just a really nice blue-collar goal here by this Ranger top line. And again, yes, they had an extra skater on the ice. Panarin, he obviously helped things along here, but still, they had to work hard just to keep possession of the puck. Because as soon as Toronto, basically touches the puck, makes any kind of a play on the puck, the penalty is going to happen. The whistle is going to blow, and you're going to get the play stoppage there. But the Rangers never allowed that to happen, and everybody, doing their part, once again, keeping possession, keeping this play alive, and helping the Rangers score what turned out to be the game-winning goal of this game. And something else that I thought was also interesting, and we already talked about how, Kreider, one of his goals was the empty netter, and of course, one of Mika's assists, one of Smith's assists, they both occurred on the empty netter as well. But something that I thought was interesting to note here is that was the Ranger go-to line. And you figured it would be, but that was the Ranger go-to line at the end of a game, crunch time, your opponent's looking for the equalizer, up by 1 goal. This is the line that Peter Laviolette and the Ranger coaching staff trusted to be on the ice and preserve this 1-goal lead. And overall, I thought they did a nice job of that. Even the empty netter, a big play made by Reilly Smith because the puck was behind the net. It was in the corner, and he's got 2 opponents bearing down on him, and he's able to get the puck back to Mika Zibanejad. Mika got it over to Kreider. Kreider delayed for a minute and scored. But I just like the fact that, they trust this line in a big spot here. And it was also interesting what happened after this. Now, granted, it's a little different because at this point, the Rangers are up by 2 goals. It's 3-1. But the Rangers actually went with a line of Trocheck, Panarin, and Cooley. And part of the reason for that is that Lafreniere at this point was dealing with an upper body injury. Everybody can breathe a sigh of relief because it sounds like he is considered day-to-day. They actually had Matt Rempe skating in Lafreniere's place during practice today. He was there with Trocheck and Panarin. Seems to just be a placeholder. But are we going to get top 6 Matt Rempe if Lafreniere has to miss a game? We'll see. I don't, first of all, I hope that Lafreniere doesn't miss the game. But if it were to happen, why not take it for a test run? What do you really have to lose at this point? Everything's kind of humming right now. You're 4-0-1 to start the season. And as we've mentioned, Panarin can elevate just about anybody. But the bottom line here, those are the 3 players, 3 forwards that the Rangers went with at this spot in the game. And then, of course, you had Cooley clearing the puck, Panarin picking it up, and going in alone and scoring on the empty netter. But I figure we could pretty much call it there. I've been talking about the Ranger third line off and on the entire season so far because I really think they've played well. I do want to eventually spend some more time talking about those 3 players, Cooley, Hedl, and Kakko, because I really think they've played well. Maybe in the next game, they'll combine for like 6 or 7 points, and that'll be the perfect time to do that. But we'll see. But I just had to give some props to those guys at the end of today's episode. And the one thing, and again, we've talked about this on and off really since the start of the season and even mentioned it a little bit earlier in today's episode. If there's one thing to nitpick, I would say for the Rangers thus far, it's that they haven't had the best starts to games. This one was a little better than some of the others. I don't think that they played poorly. I don't think it was a case where they were like asleep at the wheel. They weren't taking stupid penalties or anything like that. They weren't being lazy. There weren't too many turnovers that I can remember. It was just a case in this game of I think Toronto was just a little bit better than the Rangers, spent a little bit more time in the attacking zone than the Rangers did. It's forgivable. That's going to happen from time to time, especially when you're on the road. Nice that Igor was able to pick up the Rangers early. But I think me and probably a lot of you as well, still looking for that game where the Rangers really hit the ground running and they really just explode and basically set a tone very, very early in the game. Hopefully score a couple of goals. That's always nice. And you just kind of set that feel that it's going to be our night and we're going to skate circles around you guys. We haven't really seen that just yet. But other than that, it's really hard to nitpick a whole lot of what's gone on with the Rangers. 4-1 to start the season. You got to be feeling pretty good about that. And hopefully they can keep this thing rolling. See how long they can go without a regulation loss. It'll be a fun storyline to track as well. But yeah, we can call it there for today. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.